got a question in the back.
Yep. I'll try not to sound too doom and gloom, but of course, it's inevitable we'll have to raise taxes. But I look at it, macro standpoint as far as our spending, with the war, with our dependence on oil, with less and less jobs. What does the CED think we can do here to help reduce our dependence on oil, to have some savings, not spend so much on defense, and then to increase our productivity so we can keep the jobs here in the U.S. so they're not constantly going abroad? And can we even compete with countries such as China as far as manufacturing and things of that nature, so we can continue to grow while also generating more revenue for the government, but keeping more productivity in our sites?
Who wants to pick that one up?
You haven't spoken for a while.
All right, I'll speak for a while. People talk about productivity, and they always talk about the productivity of employed people. Probably a better measure, if you're a citizen of a country and the country has the capacity to tax you, or that country's government provides the court systems, the air traffic control, the transportation, and all the rest that enables you to operate a business. The productivity number you should be looking at is the productivity of the entire employable population. And when we look at productivity from the total workforce standpoint, as we saw earlier, there's 12 million people who are off the page over the last 10 years, 8.5 million in just this downturn. Business productivity has gone up enormously, and its competitiveness in that respect has improved significantly. But business lives and operates in the United States. How productive is the employed and unemployed worker? Because ultimately, what the only reason I'm here, really, is to tell you that it is hopelessly naive and frankly dangerous to think that you can operate a company in this country and not care about the people, the 12.5 million people who don't have jobs. It is naive and possibly dangerous for a CEO to think that it is perfectly okay to have seen his salary or her salary go from roughly 20 times his secretary's salary to 400 times his secretary's salary and no end in sight. It's possible for us to imagine that we can continue to kind of move in this direction and have a kind of high-tech plantation society where broad millions and millions of people are effectively indentured employees. They're too much in debt to do anything but do exactly what we want them to do. Earlier we heard that for some business people, that was actually the motivation for their opposition to a health care plan which provided the opportunity for a small business like mine, Hanover Investment Group, to compete with J.P. Morgan. My company has difficult health insurance issues. J.P. Morgan's doesn't. I'm wondering where Mr. Whole Foods stood on this spectrum of companies. He's a big national company. Was he trying to make it more difficult for the small producers and grocers around the country? I don't know. But it's a question that Bill's comment, he's an expert on this subject. I know nothing about the subject, but I have some familiarity with the ways of business, and having been policy director of the American Bankers Association, I have some familiarity with how corporate lobbying processes operate. Okay. Back to your question. What a CEO has to do is to recognize that they can't get off the boat. They're on the good ship United States, and they sink or swim with us, the rest of us. That's where we are. And if you want this place to be Greece, we just keep doing what we're doing. It's easy. It's blind. It's naive. And it's dangerous. If we accept a democracy, we will see the political volatility that we've seen over the last couple of electoral cycles get steadily greater and greater. More and more people under stress. And then things begin to break. And then what happens to stock values? Who wants to own stock in a company that is significantly dependent on the way the United States operates now? Nobody. My clients, all of them East Asian, a couple of them that are not, manage over $500 billion. Actually, the number is significantly more than that, but $500 billion will do. They are looking at company after company after company, and they're asking, should I continue to own the AAA debt of this company when I can see damn well the country it's operating in and its own executive leadership is wholly unaware or totally disregards the course the country's on? If I have to own dollars because that's my government policy, that I can't sell dollars, I have to own dollars, then I sell the AAA debt of that company and I buy Treasury bonds. In August, in The Economist magazine, which all of you read more or less regularly, there was a significant, interesting debate over whether the United States is experiencing a Treasury bond bubble. Treasury bond bubble. To my clients, there was no problem with this question. They were causing the Treasury bond bubble. They were selling private assets and buying Treasury bonds. Now, what happens when you sell corporate debt? You drive up the financing costs of American companies. You make it more expensive for companies to finance themselves. The spread widens. Prices go down. Yes, the stock market's on a tear now, but it should be on a tear when a central bank is effectively going to finance the entire deficit of the United States on an annualized basis. It's demanding $600 billion in 6 months. That adds up to $1.2 trillion over 12 months. And if we don't have a recovery, they will definitely have to continue that process. Okay, how much trouble is the United States in? It's probably in as much trouble as zero interest rates and a central bank buying half the deficit of a country is normal. If that's normal, we're in good shape. Okay? My clients are looking at every American company and saying, which ones of these companies do we see a consensus among companies in a way that they are beginning to behave in a way that reflects the fact that these people have, that the government you have is the government CEOs want. When the Business Roundtable and the U.S. Chamber and even my little Alexandria Chamber of Commerce wants a different government, we will have it. But at this point, the crisis has not gotten serious enough for our business community to call a halt to the stupidity and demand that elected officials think more than 12 to 24 months in the future. The answer to your question is, you guys have to bring about the government we need. Period.
Got another question here?
May I speak
you want
to
to add, Joe?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thought. The question, part of the question was, how do we have investment and employment in the United States? In a way, there is a relationship between the economic activity that goes on in the United States, its character, and to some extent its volume, and the value of our currency. One way to have all sorts of investment and activity in the United States is to drive the value of the dollar down. At that point, relative to where we are today, just about any business operation that would compete with imports or produce for export could be more competitive, even if it produces less value than is necessary today because the dollar's cheaper. What that does, of course, is it makes our entire society less wealthy. If you want to have more economic activity but at a higher level of value, the way you get that is something that Rob talked about earlier, in part, which is to have greater concentration in this country on quality education so that the average worker brings more to the job and is able to be more creative. Those of you who recall in your economics, there's something that's called a production possibility frontier. You have different combinations of labor and capital, and that defines, given the assets that you have today in terms of human capital, in terms of physical capital, what kind of output you can have at different combinations. One of the things about being the world leader is you are on the world's production possibility frontier. If you want to improve what you're doing, you have to push the frontier out. You have to innovate. If the United States is going to become more prosperous, if it's going to continue to be a world leader, we have to innovate. And innovation comes not just from the single innovator who comes up with the idea, it comes from the labor force that can make use of that idea and put it into practice successfully. So that is part of what we need. Now, tying that back into some of the discussions we've had earlier, if you have a larger public debt and you have to collect more tax revenues to service that debt, then for any given tax system, you have less revenue left over to do things like investing in education. If you want to invest in education with a bigger debt and higher debt service costs, you have to collect more taxes. At the margin, higher taxes distort economic activity and can make people choose activities that provide less value. So if you want to have a low tax system and you want to have a productive economy, you do not want to be paying large amounts in debt service. You do not want to be accumulating so much in debt. The debt in the United States has gone vertical and is approximately achieving separation velocity. If we're going to get that to slow down, the sooner we start, the better. The more responsible we are in making our fiscal policy, the better off we are. All of these things that we've been talking about tie together, and it is important that people understand that, particularly people in leadership positions in the business world.